Paul, can you hear me now? Paul, can you hear? Can anyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Thank you so much. Okay. Thank you. I'm sorry, I lost audio when Paul was introducing me, but let's not worry about that. Just give me 1 minute. I'm going to start. And let me know if you can see my screen with the slide.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you everyone for joining. And thank you to the organizers, for arranging these great free events. A lot of, speakers and a lot of great sessions. I hope you're enjoying. So, and it's not easy to take a, 1 hour out of your busy work schedule, especially the current situation, that we're all home, children is at home, we're working from home. Home has become like a summer camp, playground and whatnot. So the slide and all the code will be shared with you. I already have it in GitHub. I'm going to refresh that. And I think this session is being recorded. They will upload it. And I'll also, send you the link from the GitHub repo so you can download, because we wouldn't be able to demo everything. We just have about 46 minutes and I want to be respectful to the next speaker and I want to finish it on time. In the interest of time, if I do not answer any questions or you did not get time to ask your questions, please. Okay, so the slides are not changing on the. I think that's a problem with the Teams. There is a delay. Last time I presented with Teams, so we noticed the same thing. But I need to figure this out because I'm on the next slide already. Okay, so my contact address is on the left side. I'm not going to talk about myself. There's no time for that right now, and we don't need. So just take a note of those. I'll try to show that again. If you contact me, I'll definitely respond within 2 days. If I did not answer any question, you have any follow-up question, or you're not happy with my answer, I know a couple of people that are smarter than me. I'll try to get the answer from you. Sorry, from them and pass it to you. So why we would be talking about this topic, right? And why you want to listen to me. So as we are used to on-prem SQL Server, we use SQL Server Agent for many things. And I put few of the examples: update stats, track blocking, long-running queries, purge old data, collect WMA counter, and all that. There is a point about index maintenance. I know there's a huge debate in the community. People have a strong opinion whether you should do index maintenance or not, but that's not the point. It's up to you. But some of these tasks you still have to do even you migrate to Azure SQL database. Now, how do you do that? Now, you do not have a SQL Server agent in Azure SQL database. And I know some of you will be saying, well, I'm just going to use managed instance because managed instance has a built-in SQL Server agent. If your company has enough money and you are not worried about the cost in cloud, welcome, go for it. But if you look at the cost of the compute between Azure SQL database and a managed instance, you'll see that in a managed instance to get the same compute as Azure SQL database, you are pretty much spending twice. So it's 2x. And that's why I do not think that everybody's choice will be just to use managed instance for every workload in Azure with the PaaS service. And PaaS means platform as a service, where Microsoft will provide you the hardware, Microsoft will provide the OS and the version of SQL Server. You do not have to worry about those. That's called PaaS service. And that's the reason that, I started looking at for my own full-time job. I work in a financial industry in the investment management firm. and we are moving stuff to cloud. And I needed to come up with ways to, to do this kind of stuff with Azure SQL database. You might have, maybe wondering why backup is not here, because backup is a major part that we use Azure SQL Server agent to manage our backups. And the reason the backup is not here, with Azure SQL database, you do not need to take manual backup. It's automated. You set it up, you forget about it. You can take point-in-time backup up to 35 days. You can take long-term backup for 10 years. If you need to know more details, please ping me later on. That's why I didn't put the backup here. So these are some of the reasons that I needed to find a solution. So I'm not going to just give you one solution today. I'll talk about all the things that I looked at. So because, I don't know your need, I don't know, how much scalability you need, how many instances you have, what kind of task you need to do, so you can decide for yourself. The reason I put this slide is on-premise versus cloud. Most of the people I talk to, and including myself today, I'm in a hybrid situation. What does that mean? I have some of my resources on-prem, some of resource in the cloud. And I'm going to show you some methods that I can leverage my on-premise infrastructure that I still have to control my stuff in the cloud. So that's still an option. And other option can be hybrid. I can use some of the resources from here, some of the services from cloud, or I can, if someone say, okay, I do not have anything on-premise, I'm 100% cloud, we do not have a single thing on-premise. I'll also show some solution for those kind of need. So some of the lists that I have here, when I say on-premise, I can use link server, I can use PowerShell, and I can use Windows Scheduler to schedule my PowerShell code or PowerShell functions, or I can use a third-party scheduler like Tidal. I use Tidal a lot for different reason. You can have your PowerShell script and then have Tidal schedule it, run it against your Azure SQL databases. Azure IaaS, I put it there, and IaaS means infrastructure as a service. Here, Microsoft will give you the hardware. You can choose your Windows version. You can choose your SQL Server version. You can just have a Windows VM or a Linux VM without SQL Server. That's okay too. And so what a lot of people did is what I said on the first one about PowerShell and Windows Scheduler. If you do not have a VM or if you do not have a host on-prem, you can grab one from there and do it in there. So you have in the Azure IaaS, you can have a Azure VM, write PowerShell, schedule it through Windows Scheduler, or what some people did, they installed a SQL Server there with a SQL Server agent, and then used it to run all their maintenance and alerting monitoring to point to Azure SQL databases. The last one is a PaaS solution that I do not want to use anything with IaaS or anything in on-prem. There are services in cloud, and those services are totally separate from Azure SQL database. So Azure SQL database is a service, and there are other services that you can leverage to control or to do maintenance within your Azure SQL database. Some of the examples: Azure Automation, Azure Function, Elastic Job Agents, and Web Jobs. I'm not going to talk about Web Jobs. I personally think it's not a right fit, but I see many people use it, so I mentioned it. You can explore it by yourself, but the other three I'll talk about those. I have demo scripts, and if you do not get through everything, you should be able to download my scripts and run through those. The first option, very simple. You have on-prem SQL Server, you have link server, you point to Azure SQL database, and you do whatever you need to do. Second one, I talked about PowerShell. I can run it manually, but of course, if I have hundreds of servers, I'm not going to, and if I have to run it every hour, I'm not going to sit there 24/7 and click. So I can schedule it using Windows Scheduler, and it keeps a history. I can see if it fails, if it runs, how long it took, the duration and everything. And I'll try to show that in the demo. I will show it. The third one is Azure Automation, and Azure Automation itself is a service, and the heart of the Azure Automation is a Runbook. And a Runbook is it's a piece of code. You can write it in PowerShell or in Python. There are two major types of Runbook. One is graphical, and other one is a code. Just pure code. And when I say graphical, some of you might be able to relate. If you have written your first SSIS package, you go to Visual Studio. You drag and drop few things, and then you connect those with arrows, then you write your code inside those boxes, or you set up, some of the criteria into those boxes. You can do something similar. Also in the runbook, there are two different major, there's two major differences. One is we call it a regular runbook, and other one is a workflow runbook. Workflow is for more critical jobs that if you're trying to do, because workflows can retain its state. So if there's a failure, it can go and restart from where it failed. If it's a regular runbook, there is no state. So if it fails, you have to start from the beginning. There is also possibility, and there is feature built in that you can use Runbook to do maintenance against your on-prem assets. For that, you need to add other components. Runbooks can trigger you can trigger a runbook from a lot of things, by PowerShell, from webhooks. You can have alerts, Azure Alert, which is not our topic, but if you are using, when an alert trigger, you can say that as an action item, go and start that runbook. Give you an example. My database size or my consumption on my compute is reaching to a level that I need to scale up. Now, I'm not going to be sitting there all day to watch it. I can have Azure Alert. If you reach that threshold for this many minutes or seconds, go and trigger the runbook. That will go and scale up, scale down, or whatever you need to do. There are shared resources you can use with Azure Automation. So like your connection strings, your certificates, credentials, you create those once, put it in there's a folder. I will look at it in the portal. You put it there. You can use those on multiple runbooks, so you do not have to write those every time. So, whatever I told you so far, why would we, why would we be using Runbook or some of the other features? Pretty much you do it once. You can use it across your enterprise, right? So if you have hundreds or thousands of Azure Sql databases, you can use the same code. You can do it same way. It works across, Windows and Linux runbooks. So if you're running SQL Server on Linux, or if you have, other Azure VMs like Linux VM running SQL Server, you can control those too. And you can also have standard configuration, right? So you can use Runbook. Runbooks can go and check your configurations and see if you are off from your standard configuration, and it can also rectify some of this stuff for you. And this can happen both in cloud, also in on-prem. So you can do it in both places. Next is Azure Function. So Azure Function, I was not looking at, if you asked me like 2 years ago, I was not too excited about Azure Function because my primary concern was it did not support PowerShell, and Azure Function had limited run. The max runtime was limited to 10 minutes. Other problem was, which is a problem with the runbook also today. If you have a time-sensitive maintenance task that I want it to be exactly running at that minute and second, I could not pre-allocate compute. So once I submit my function to run, it had to wait to reserve compute, then it will start running. And that's still a problem with runbooks. But what happened is last year in Ignite, there are a bunch of new features were announced about function. One is a PowerShell, which I'm super excited. Runtime is extended, and now I can reserve my own compute. But again, it comes with a cost, right? So if you do not have those time-sensitive tasks, you can see, I can wait for a couple of seconds to minute. Once I submit, then that's fine. You do not need to reserve. Then you can save money, because as soon as you do not want a cold start, you want to run right away. It means those compute will be bound to your account. They will be reserved, so you'll be paying for it 24/7, though you're not using those. So keep that in mind. The last one is Elastic database jobs. And this is this is as close as you can get to what we are used to today on premise. And what I mean by that, all the objects that you see in MSDB, like all those store procs called SP start job, SP delete job, stop job, and all those, they get created when you turn on this service. So what this does, this is again a separate service, but it uses a Azure SQL database to hold your metadata, like your jobs, your job definitions, your targets. All those get saved, and you can schedule those and run it from cloud. It's totally a cloud service. One caution I'll give you is I'm watching this for close to 2 years now, still in preview. So I'm just letting you know, in my experience, if I see any feature in preview for that long, it kind of, I get a little bit nervous about, what the product team is thinking about it. Maybe they're still developing, maybe there's nothing, but it's just one thing that I want to point out too. Other drawback I see here is it doesn't support PowerShell as of today. And in my current workplace, or in my experience, it's a lot easier if you have hundreds and hundreds of instances. Use PowerShell, loop through, collect everything, or do whatever you need to do. I do that a lot. And if you're doing the same, I'm just letting you know that there is no PowerShell support. It's all T-SQL based. So these are kind of the core components. Elastic Job Agent is the engine, job database. It has to be, Microsoft recommend that it should be a S1. S1 means that the size of the database, the size of the compute. They suggest you use a S1 that will hold all your metadata. And then you have a target group, means run this job against these targets. And then of course you have your jobs. Now, when I said target group, this is just a copy paste. I think from Microsoft documentation, I put the URL there. So a target group can be anything. I mean, there's a bunch of combinations I put here. Can be Elastic Pool, can be Azure SQL Server, can be a single database, can be shard management databases. So you can target pretty much everything. You can exclude, you can include, do any kind of combinations that you need. The reason I said that, this is as close as you can get what we are used to today on premise, because as soon as you turn on the service, the Elastic Job Agent service, you can do it from GUI or from PowerShell. I did it from PowerShell. All these objects get created into that database. So they are pretty much, and if you go to it today, open MSDB, look at some of this, you will see a lot of similarity. So I'm going to take a pause. And any questions so far? Okay, I do not see anything. So I'm going to move on. So I'm going to move to demo, and I do not have any other slides. I put the things that I'm using today for the demo, just so in case if you're running my code, if you're not using these versions, I'm not saying it's not going to run, but in case if you see some discrepancy, you can let me know. I can test it in a different version. So I'm using VS Code, SQL Server 2019, Management Studio, and PowerShell 7.0. Of course, I'll show you some stuff in the portal because we are talking about Azure. I don't think so we'll have time to come back. Maybe we should come back here to wrap up when time comes. So let me change to duplicate. And can you still see my screen?
Yes.
Great. Thank you.
Demo screen.
Yes. Thank you.
You're seeing the slide.
You are still
just sharing the PowerPoint.
Oh, it's still okay. Sorry, so I need to change something. So thank you. Maybe I shared a. Okay, so maybe I shared a stop sharing. Share again. Maybe I should just share the screen. I think that'll be better. How about now? Do you see the portal?
Yes.
Thank
Yes.
you. Thank you very much. Sorry. I think I shared an application instead of the whole screen. Sorry. Okay, so I know this is a shorter session for 50 minutes. So what I did before all of you came online, I created all this resources, and I'll talk about some of this. But one tip for any of you, I put everything into this resource group. If you do not know what's a resource group, it's a logical container. So after this demo or after this session, what I'll do, I'll go and just delete this resource group, then it will delete all these resources instead of me going and trying to delete one by one. What that does, as you can see, I'm using my Visual Studio subscription. That way I can save some money and stretch my money. Just to show you, last time I did this was on 17th of June and I did not close it. And you can see that I finished all my $150 and the forecast is $661 for the month, which is not really cool, right? So if you are playing in Azure, please, one tip, always use resource group. And so how did these resources get created? I have this setup screen. Of course, when I upload the code, I'm not going to give you my subscription ID. And even if I give it, you won't be able to connect. If you are running my code, I'm not exposing my password. So password is saved here. And then I have some PowerShell that goes and grab the password. It gets login and it creates all these resources to Azure SQL Server, bunch of Azure SQL database. Other thing I did, I created an automation account to run, show you the Runbook. So that code created an automation account with a demo Runbook. I did not run the number 2, which I'll run during, when I start again. Number 5 is what I was telling you, it's the Elastic Job Agent service. So this is the piece of code I said, give me this service. This is the resource group name, server name, database name. I could put any database, and I created this database in my setup demo code. Someone has a question? I see someone turned on their mic. Okay, thanks. I am going to use also show you the Azure function under function apps. And I did not want to type all this in front of you. So if anybody wants to take an attempt on that function, this is the code that will come with it. Also for the Runbook, I did not want to type the whole Runbook. So this is the code for the Runbook that I'll share with you. And I did not write it from scratch. I copied it from the download center. Someone in Microsoft wrote it. I just edited it for my own need. Okay, looks like I cannot get to my bottom to switch everything. Okay, so let's get it started. So the first one I talked about a link server, right? So here I'm going to connect to a on-premise SQL server. It's running on my laptop that I'm using for the demo. And I'm going to create a database and a table to collect some information. So now I'm creating a link server pointing to one of the server in cloud in Azure to this database. And if you want to see that, I can show you right here. We're talking about this is a server in cloud. So I'll create a link server pointing to this database, but the link server will reside in my on-premise SQL server. If you guys have any, if anybody has question, please put it in the chat so the moderator can read to me. because I'm really not watching that actively, trying to do this. So now we have the link server. If we go here, sorry, this is the link server pointing to Azure SQL database. As you can see that it's working because we can see all the objects there. Now what I'm doing, I'm going to collect the size of this database, bring it to on-premise SQL Server and save it. Now, you know, some of you might say, you know, after spending all this, half an hour, you've been talking, now you're just collecting database size. So that's not the point here. You can replace my code with anything you want. If you want to do some maintenance or anything you need to do, you can do that. I'm just trying to show you the, how you can set this up. So let's run this. And as you can see that I'm using my link server name here. And it went there. So let's see what we can find. I'm still everything on premise. Now it went to the cloud, to this server, to this database. It has 3 files. It got all the details about those 3 files. Now someone might, if any of you want to say, look, I don't want to bring that data to on premise. I want to save it in cloud. So what I did here, I'm going to connect to this cloud database. And you cannot use a use statement, so you always have to be in the right context. So what I'm saying now, I'm going to collect the data about this database, but I'm going to save it within that database. So I'm creating a table with database size, same definition at what I had on premise. And now I want to, I'm still running this from my on-premise server. As you can see, I'm connected to my local instance, but now I'm not going to bring the data to on-premise. I'm going to save it within that database. So here I'm inserting into, but using the link server. Why would I do that? I don't know. I'm just showing you a couple of different options. It's up to you, based on your need, you can choose what you want to do. So now let's go to the database and see what, if it's there. Right? It got collected and now we are connected to the cloud instance. Now, as I showed you here, I have a bunch of databases, right? I do not have just one. I have 6 databases here. Now, if I want to collect this for each one, do I create, and if you have hundreds of this, right? Are you going to create so many link server for each one? And, how do you manage this, right? So what I want to show you is I'm going to do the same thing, but this time I'm going to use a PowerShell code. And what this will do, and you can do it at any level you want to. I'm starting at a resource group level, but you can start it one step higher. What I mean by that, you can start using it at a management group level and iterate through all your subscription, all your resource group, look for all Azure SQL Server. Inside that, go and look for each Azure SQL database and loop through and bring that data at one go. That way, you do any maintenance, anything you want to do, you do not have to do it one by one. So, and I'm using the same query that I showed you about the size, right? So let's run this. You can see that it's going through each database and it collected from every one. Now, confirm that. Let's look at this just to make sure that it got collected. Before we had 3 rows, now it went and got it from every database that I had under that resource group. So the next question some of you might ask, am I going to run this PowerShell function manually? Of course not. So if I want to schedule it, what do I do? And I talked about in my presentation that I can use Windows Task Scheduler. And if you see here, I'm calling PowerShell, exact same file that I ran from VS Code. And I have it scheduled 11 a.m. every day, but we can go and run it manually right now. So you can schedule it from here. You do not need a SQL Server. You do not need SQL Server agent. It will go run, save the data wherever you want to. In my case, I'm saving it on premise, but I can point it to a Azure SQL database too. And there's a history here. Task completed. So let's go and so the last time was 11:31. Let's run this. We should see a new timestamp 11:32. So it collected again. So that's kind of how link server, PowerShell, task scheduler, you can combine all these three things, or not combined. Like if you're using PowerShell, you don't. I still use link server because I'm bringing it back here. I can also set this up in an IIS VM if I do not want to use any on-premise stuff. So the next one is a runbook. So what I did here, I'm pointing to Azure SQL Server and the Azure SQL database named test runbook. I'm creating a table, cluster index. I do some update and check the fragmentation. And then we'll run a piece of code. So here, as you can see, it's fragmented with 39%. Now, please do not go and start telling people that if your indexes are fragmented over 39%, go and do a full rebuild or whatever. I'm not advocating that at all. You do whatever you need on your environment. I'm just trying to show this, that how you can use this runbook to mitigate or do a maintenance task. So we'll go to automation account. And as I said, runbook, there's some cool things here. Within just using the GUI or in the portal, you can pretty much create a runbook. You can import a runbook from the gallery, or if you have saved it from somewhere else, you can import it here. You can go to the gallery, and in the gallery, you can even, if you're working with SQL Server, you can filter it, and you can upload it pretty much whatever you need. You can, so I have a test one. You can edit, you can test it, you can save it, you can schedule it all from here. There's schedules. You can set up jobs. So let's go and edit this. So I'm going to remove this code and paste this. No. Okay. As I said, I want to make sure I make it clear that I did not write this from scratch. I put it here. It was written by Microsoft engineers. I copied and edited this. So basically, it's all they have pretty good comments that you'd be able to read through, but I'm not going to do that. So basically, it's coming. The core of this is it checks the fragmentation on the top. If it qualifies, it goes and rebuild. Again, I'm not advocating it. I'm just trying to show you a way to how you can do this. So we saw that it was fragmented 39%. I think I have it hard coded to 20% here. So now we can go to test pane, start this. It's going to use all the default values. As you can see, I said start, but it didn't start. This is what I was saying. If you have a time sensitive thing, this might not be the ideal for you. As you see, it's queued up. Now it's starting because it grabs the compute power or resource. Now it's starting, and it will tell us when it's done. Now it says completed. So let's go and look at our fragmentation right now. As you can see, it got to 0. So that runbook. So now I can have an alert checking all my fragmentation and whatever you guys decide, right? And it can trigger an alert. It can go and say runbook. You start running, go through and mitigate this. So it's all automated. Let's talk about, we have 12 minutes. Let's talk about functions.
And Tab, there was a question in the IM as well. Is Azure Data Studio your preference, or are you using SSMS more frequently?
Nice question. I use both. There's a nice article. Whoever asked that, if you ping me, I'll send you a link. Microsoft finally published some, not finally, actually, it was during the last past summit. Actually, I saw that last year, November, kind of side-by-side comparison, right? If I'm doing this, use Data Studio. If I'm doing this, you still use Management Studio. Like, as I told you at the beginning, if I have to take a guess, I don't want to give you my company, all the informations, but majority of my resources are still on premise. I use a lot. I also use Azure Data Studio, especially I work a lot with the Kusto query language. And just recently, Microsoft, they came up with a plugin for Kusto, which I'm really excited. And I started writing notebooks for my presentations and for my own sake. So if you're using notebooks, a cool thing, because I can have my comment, I can have my query, I can have a small data set, I can package all those, send it to people. So, like I always find out, like, bosses, like big boss, they don't like, they don't like to, read too much, right? So if they're looking for something, I can have my comment, I can have my query, I can have the data set, and save it, ship it to them. They can open it, they can look at it. So I use both to answer the question. But if you send me a private, ping, I can send you that link. It's very useful for you to make choice what you should use at what time. Hopefully that answered the question. So let's go app service. So again, function app itself is it's a service. It's a big topic. We do not have time for all this, because of time. One thing I did before you came online, I turned on the identity. What that does, it put an object in the Active Directory named SQL Agent Demo. And what that let me do is, in my Azure SQL database, you see this user, it's the AD object, SQL Agent Demo. Now, I do not need to have any username, any password anywhere in my function. So when it calls, of course, I have to give it the privilege that I want. So when my function will go and call this, it actually grabs a token and from this AD object, and it goes and try to authenticate itself against the Azure SQL database using that token. That way, I do not have to have any password, anything. And it took me a while to figure out, because it was not well documented in the Microsoft documentation. So probably it changed. I haven't checked it, but the guts of this is this 4-line, and it took me a while to figure this out. So if you're interested, go and look up in my blog, sqlworldwide.com. Search for it, you'll see it. I kind of detailed these steps for my own sake to be started with, so I don't forget when I write next time. I know how I did it, because otherwise I'll forget. So that's why I like this security model. So I wrote a function here. Again, the code will come with it. So let's redo the same thing. Let's go and cause some more fragmentation. And these codes are, I literally wrote it in jet fragmentation. So, and if you know T-SQL, you can see what I did here with this replicate function. So now I am 98% fragmented, right? So, and I did that purposely. So code and test. Other good thing with the functions is all your dependencies are automatically managed. What I mean by that. So if I say that I need these PowerShell modules, you put it at the top. Microsoft will manage this for you. If they have a newer version, they will load the newer version. If you do not want it, you can also put what versions you want, even with major, minor. And if they release a newer version beyond your requirement, they will not load it. It's pretty cool. So I do not have to worry about like many things with this. And it supports PowerShell. So that's kind of one of the things that I wanted, because I a lot of scripts that over a period of time that I wrote with PowerShell, so I didn't want to give up on those. So it's running right now. Once it's done, if we go and double check the fragmentation, we should we'll be able to see it to 0. Now 0 or close to 0. The last thing that we talked about is the Elastic Job Agent. And so we'll go back and try to see what it did or once it's done. I'm trying to optimize the time. So before all of you came online, I tried to put a lot of comments here. So I ran from here all the way to line 78 or 79. The reason I did this is pretty much setting up the permissions between my job server and all my targets. Because if I have, and again, I put comments here, I created credentials, added those into my target and gave those permissions whatever I need. If your maintenance task only need to read stuff and collect data, you give it read. If you want this to modify something, you have to give it modify permission. So what's going on here? Call. Okay, let it run. I didn't expect it to take that long. So let's move here. Switch to. I'm just going to show one, but this code show you 3 different examples. I don't think so. We'll get time. You can run those by yourself in your own time. So I'm creating a target group in my job server, and I have to make sure that I'm in the correct database that I turned on my service against, because this store procedures only exist where I turned on my service against the database that I use. And I put my target group here. I said, this is the server name. So we did that, and we can go and, look at this, our target groups. Now I'm adding a job, and I gave the job a name. And again, this is just a shell. I haven't added anything really in my job. Here I'm adding a job step. And as you can see, I put a code here. What it does is, if you are familiar with Azure Sql database, and I hope you know this DMV called sys DMDB resources stats. Is collect different stats every 15 seconds. And then it has a small retention. So, but it aggregates and move it to a different DMV, which keeps it for a longer period with aggregate data. But if you want to collect this for whatever if you have a performance issue or anything, you can do that. So what I'm doing here, and you can see here, I have a output database called DBA warehouse, and I put a table name. So it's going to collect this data, save it in that database in that table. Could I use the same database? Yes, I could. But normally, even my on-premise, I try to keep my warehouse separate than anything else. It's your choice. You do not need 2 databases if you don't want to. And now my job is created, and I can see all the details. I put a couple of code that how you can see the latest version, details about your job. And now let's start this job. So the job is running. We can go and see the status. In progress. Now you see, I only clicked one job, but it created a bunch of job steps because my target group has multiple databases, because my target group was a server and it's running against all the databases in that server. That's why I see all these steps. Succeeded. Now let's switch to warehouse. As you can see, I was telling you to give all kind of stats about, your latency, you just put, bunch of things. That's not the point here. It's to collect. So if you go down here, I have, more examples to show you. Okay, so it looks like it did. So let's go and see the fragmentation now. Yep, it's to 0 because the function just finished.
We have a few more minutes left there.
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay.
I'm done. Sorry, I'm wrong slide. Yep. So can you guys see my slide?
Yes, we can. We can see the demo. Wrap
Yep.
up.
So wrap up. Multiple options, hybrid model, multiple language, T-SQL, PowerShell, Python, whatever you like. No limitations, scalability. Please focus on that. The way I'm working today, I'm not going to give you a number. Say I have 20 Azure SQL database. The way I'm trying to set this up, if tomorrow I have 200, I do not have to change anything, including my whole alerting, monitoring, whatever I'm doing, and be flexible. Like I said, I was heavily invested into Runbook because it was using PowerShell. But when I saw the function supports Runbook, it was for me just to switch, understand how function app works, work with the security. Once I know, it's just a matter of taking my PowerShell code and move it to functions. Some of the resources you can read about, again, my contacts, like, I know we rushed through this in the interest of time. Please, contact me. Any of these 4 ways will work. And I promise that I'll respond to you. And so thank you. We have a minute. It's up to the moderator how long he allows us to ask question and answer. If anybody has anything, I'll stand by. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Taiob. Yeah, any questions, folks, on the call? You could either unmute or type them in the IM window. No, doesn't look like it. Okay, very good. Thank you very much. I will stop the recording and we will post this on YouTube. Oh,
Thank
wait,
you.
there seems to be one question that just came in. Is there documentation or sample scripts on how to create these jobs in Azure SQL?
For the Elastic Job Agent, I guess.
Does it specify? VJ, can you specify? Is that for yes, for Elastic Job Agent?
Yes. So in my code, I think I was showing you how to create the jobs. Am I not? Sorry. Yeah, this is how I'm creating the job right here.
We could just see your desktop only, the blank desktop.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, so it will be it will come with the with the code that I'm going to share. Let's just put it that way so others can ask questions. Yes, my sample code has all the details for you to create the jobs. Yes.
Okay, and we will make that deck available as well. So thank you.
Yeah, and it's in my GitHub. I can share that link with organizers too.
Perfect. All right. Any other questions? Nope. All right. Well, thank you very much again. Stop the recording now.
Okay, can you just leave the chat for a minute?